A little girl told her father something terrifying about her stepmother. The man decided to hide in the closet, and the scene he heard left him in shock. 2 years after Anna's tragic death, Ethan still felt a void that seemed impossible to fill. His job at the law firm kept him afloat, but sadness lurked in every corner of his life. Most of his concern was for Kate, his 6-year-old daughter, who had suffered more losses at such a young age than anyone should bear. The girl spent long hours playing alone in her room, enveloped in a silence that broke her father's heart. Ethan knew they had to move forward, even if imagining how to do so seemed almost impossible. It was then that he met Daniela. He first saw her at a social event for the firm, and from that moment, something about her brought him relief. Daniela was a charismatic woman with a warm smile that seemed to embody understanding. She showed genuine interest in Ethan, and her company felt like an unexpected balm amid the storm. As weeks passed, they began to date. Daniela made him laugh again, something he had forgotten how to feel. It didn't take long for Ethan to realize he enjoyed every moment spent with her. Guilt about moving on so quickly sometimes crept in, but he clung to the idea that Kate needed a new maternal figure. Perhaps with Daniela, they could begin to rebuild what remained of their broken family. Despite the happiness he began to glimpse, Ethan was aware of the reservations from those around him. Josh, his best friend, had commented on more than one occasion that things were moving too fast. "It's natural that you're looking for stability," Josh had said, "but just make sure she's the right person." Ethan, however, was convinced he had found someone who could understand his pain. He chose to ignore the warnings, trusting that this time he had made the right choice. On the day Daniela met Kate, Ethan felt a pang of nervousness in his chest. The girl had remained distant since her mother passed away, and he wasn't sure how she would react to another woman in their lives. Daniela arrived with a small stuffed animal as a gift, an apparently insignificant gesture, but meaningful to Ethan. However, Kate's reaction was cold. She took the toy silently and placed it on the table without saying a word. Ethan tried to downplay it. It's normal for her to take time to adjust, he thought. She just needs time. Daniela, far from being discouraged, offered the girl a patient smile. "Don't worry, Ethan," she whispered afterward. "It's just a matter of time." The wedding came sooner than many would have expected. Ethan and Daniela opted for a simple ceremony, wanting to keep everything discreet and private. For Ethan, marrying Daniela represented an opportunity to leave behind the darkness and move toward a more hopeful future. However, during the ceremony, Kate stayed close to her father, never taking her eyes off Daniela. The distrust in the girl's eyes felt like a small alarm ringing in Ethan's mind, but he chose to ignore it. "She just needs time," he repeated to himself. Daniela moved into Ethan's house shortly after the wedding, and at first, everything seemed to improve. Daniela's presence provided him a breath of fresh air he didn't realize he needed. She took charge of the household, drove Kate to school, and organized dinners with friends, trying to integrate herself into their new life. Ethan felt that he had finally found a new normal. Despite Daniela's efforts, Kate continued to keep her distance. The girl preferred spending time alone in her room or silently playing with her dolls. Whenever Daniela tried to connect, Kate responded with one-word answers or hid behind her father. Ethan wanted to believe it was just a matter of time, but inside, something didn't feel right. Why couldn't Kate adapt to Daniela's presence? One night, as Ethan tucked Kate into bed, the girl surprised him with a question that left him bewildered. "Is Daniela going to stay here forever?" she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost inaudible. Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond instantly. He stroked his daughter's hair and smiled tenderly. "Yes, sweetheart, Daniela is part of our family now." Kate didn't say anything else. She simply looked at him with her big, dark eyes, then turned to face the wall, enveloping herself in the silence that had become her norm. That look lingered with Ethan all night. It was a gaze filled with questions he didn't know how to answer, and for the first time, he felt a slight pang of unease in his chest. Days went on, and while Ethan tried to focus on his work and family routine, Kate's attitude weighed heavily on him. Each day, the girl seemed more distant, more locked in her own world, and although he wanted to convince himself it was all part of the process, doubt began to grow inside him. Daniela, for her part, maintained her optimistic and carefree demeanor. She kept telling him that everything would get better with time, but Ethan wasn't so sure. That night, while sitting alone in his home office, Josh's words echoed in his mind. Had it really been a good idea to marry so quickly? Was he trying to fill a void that hadn't healed yet? He rubbed his face with his hands, trying to push those thoughts away. He didn't want to doubt Daniela, not after all she had done for them. He had to believe everything would be fine. However, deep down, he knew something was off. The small warning signs had already begun to appear, even though he continued to ignore them, holding on to the hope that time would resolve everything. But Kate's gaze, that look filled with unanswered questions, wouldn't let him rest. The first months of marriage passed without major upheavals, or at least that was how Ethan perceived it. Daniela seemed to handle her role as a stepmother well, although Kate remained distant and increasingly trapped in her own world. However, with his demanding work schedule at the law firm, Ethan couldn't dedicate as much time to his daughter as he wished. He left much of the daily responsibility to Daniela, trusting that she would know how to earn the girl's trust. At first, everything seemed to progress smoothly. Daniela took Kate to school and prepared dinners, while Ethan worked long hours trying to maintain his position as a partner at the firm. However, little by little, cracks in the routine began to appear. Ethan started to notice subtle changes in his wife's behavior. Daniela, who had initially been sweet and attentive, now appeared more distant. She claimed to be busy with her work as an interior designer, which explained her frequent outings to meet clients. However, Daniela's excuses became increasingly vague, and the hours she left and returned home didn't add up for Ethan. One night, while they were having dinner together, Daniela casually mentioned that she had a meeting the next day with an important client. Curious, Ethan asked who it was. Daniela smiled but averted her gaze before responding. "It's a new project, a contact I recently made. Nothing interesting." Although Ethan didn't press further, that response left him feeling uneasy. He realized Daniela often avoided giving him too much information about her meetings. It wasn't exactly a lie, but something in her tone made him suspicious. Why was it so hard for her to speak clearly with him? Meanwhile, Kate was becoming increasingly quiet and reserved. The girl, who used to be cheerful and curious, now preferred to spend afternoons alone in her room, playing silently. Ethan tried to engage her in conversation, but her answers were short and evasive. When he asked how school was or what she had done with Daniela during the day, Kate shrugged and changed the subject. Clara, the young nanny, soon noticed these changes. She had developed a close bond with Kate during the months she had cared for her. One afternoon, while Ethan was at work, Clara decided to ask the girl what was bothering her. "Is everything okay, Sophie?" she asked gently while brushing the girl's hair. Kate, looking down, murmured, "I don't like how Daniela looks at me when we're alone." Clara felt a knot in her stomach upon hearing those words. "How does she look at you?" she pressed gently. Kate shrugged. "Like she doesn't love me." Those words set off an internal alarm for Clara. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the way Kate said it was unsettling. Clara decided she needed to talk to Ethan, but wanted to ensure she chose the right moment. That same week, Josh invited Ethan for drinks after work. During their conversation, Josh took the opportunity to express his concerns. "I know it's not my place, Ethan, but I've never quite liked Daniela. There's something about her. I don't know. Have you never felt she's a bit distant?" Ethan tensed. He knew Josh didn't say such things maliciously, but the conversation made him uncomfortable. Was Josh seeing something he hadn't noticed? "You're exaggerating," Ethan replied with a forced smile. "It's normal for us to still be adjusting. It's been a difficult process for everyone." Josh nodded, But the comment lingered in the air, resonating in Ethan's mind long after their conversation ended. Deep down, he was starting to wonder if he was truly ignoring important signs. The following week, Ethan came home earlier than usual and found Daniela in the living room, speaking softly on the phone. As soon as she saw him, she hung up immediately and hurried to kiss him on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. "Who was that?" Ethan asked casually. "Oh, a friend from work," Daniela replied with a quick smile, avoiding his gaze. Ethan felt the discomfort settle in his chest again. He didn't want to press her, but something about her behavior was increasingly unsettling. That night, while they were in bed, Daniela received a message on her phone. Seeing Ethan awake, she quickly turned off the screen and placed the phone face down on the nightstand. Ethan said nothing, but the knot in his stomach tightened a little more. What was Daniela hiding? The next day, while Clara was caring for Kate, the girl dared to tell her something more. "Daniela talks to someone when Dad isn't here, but she always tells me not to say anything." Clara felt a chill run down her spine upon hearing that. "And do you know who that person is?" she asked softly. Kate shook her head. "I don't know. But she talks quietly, as if it's a secret." That confession left Clara unsettled. She decided she could no longer stay silent. That night, when Ethan got home, Clara asked to speak with him alone. Clara told Ethan everything Kate had said, the cold looks, the quiet conversations, and the warnings not to talk to him. Although Ethan initially tried to downplay it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He stayed awake that night, replaying every detail in his mind. Could it be that Daniela was hiding something? Could Kate have misinterpreted the situation? Or worse still, could there be something darker happening beneath the surface? For the first time since they got married, Ethan felt a genuine sense of alarm. He knew he could no longer ignore what was going on. The doubts he had tried to suppress were starting to grow, and soon he would have to face them. Ethan's discomfort grew with each passing day. Despite his attempts to stay calm and focus on his work, Daniela's attitude and Kate's withdrawn behavior continued to disturb him. He couldn't get his daughter's words or Clara's revelations out of his mind. Everything pointed to something strange happening in his home, but Ethan resisted jumping to conclusions. Was it possible that Daniela had hidden intentions? The idea was painful and uncomfortable, yet the doubt lingered, fed by the small details he couldn't ignore. That week, Josh insisted they meet. He had noticed Ethan seemed more distracted than usual, and his concern for him only grew. One afternoon, after work, they met at their usual bar. Ethan was restless, swirling his glass of whiskey without really drinking it, while Josh watched him silently. "Ethan, I have to be honest with you," Josh finally said. "What I'm about to say isn't easy, but as your friend, I can't stay silent. I don't trust Daniela. I never have." Ethan looked up, surprised by the firmness of his friend's words. Josh had never been so direct. "Why do you say that?" Ethan asked, trying to stay calm, even though inside he felt something slowly breaking. Josh took a deep breath before continuing. "It's hard to explain, but I've always felt like she's acting, like everything she does is calculated. And now, with the things Clara has told you, I think you should be on alert." Josh's words resonated in Ethan's mind like an alarm he couldn't ignore. For months, he had tried to convince himself everything was fine, that the signs he saw were merely misunderstandings caused by adapting to a new life. But now, with his best friend confirming those same suspicions, doubt morphed into fear. "Do you think she's cheating on me?" Ethan asked, his voice low and tense. Josh looked at him seriously. "I can't say for sure, but something's not right. Haven't you noticed how distant she's been lately? Or how little she tells you about her meetings? It's not normal, Ethan. And you know it." Ethan leaned back in his chair, running his hands over his face. He felt the pressure building in his chest, as if the air around him was growing heavier. "Kate feels it too," he murmured, more to himself than to Josh. "She's told me Daniela looks at her in a way that scares her." Josh frowned, clearly worried. "That's serious, Ethan. You can't ignore it. Kate is a child, but kids have a way of sensing things that adults sometimes overlook." That night, upon arriving home, Ethan tried to maintain his composure, but every small gesture from Daniela put him on edge. During dinner, he watched her closely, the way she avoided his gaze, how she responded to his questions with generic phrases, and how quickly she slipped away to her phone whenever she could. For the first time, Ethan began to seriously question every excuse Daniela had given him in recent months. The late-night meetings, the calls at odd hours, the messages she received and quickly hid. Could it be that Daniela had a secret life? After dinner, Daniela mentioned that she had another important meeting the next day and would be back late. Ethan nodded, but this time he didn't stay silent. "Who's the meeting with?" he asked casually. Daniela looked at him for a moment, and Ethan saw something flicker in her eyes, a spark of nervousness, quickly replaced by a relaxed smile. "It's with a new client. I'm helping to renovate their office," she said while clearing the dishes. Ethan didn't say anything else, but distrust grew inside him like an unsettling shadow. Later, Ethan went to Kate's room to tuck her in. He found her sitting on her bed, hugging the stuffed animal that Daniela had given her the day they met. The image stirred a mix of sadness and guilt within him. His daughter looked so small, so vulnerable, and he wondered if he had done the right thing by bringing Daniela into their lives. "How are you, little one?" he asked as he sat beside her. Kate looked at him with her big dark eyes and then whispered, "I don't want Daniela to stay here, Dad." Ethan's heart sank at those words. What could he say in response? For months, he had tried to build a family for the two of them, but now it seemed that family was crumbling before his very eyes. "Everything is going to be okay, Sophie," he murmured, trying to sound convincing, even though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. He hugged her tightly, feeling how she clung to him, as if seeking the safety she felt she had lost. That night, after tucking Kate in, Ethan sat on the couch, lost in thought. Josh's warnings, Kate's words, Daniela's evasive behaviors, everything piled up in his mind, forming a puzzle he couldn't solve. For the first time, Ethan accepted he could no longer ignore the signs. Something was happening in his home, something he didn't fully understand, but couldn't continue to overlook. He needed to discover the truth, even if he feared what he might find. With a heavy heart, he made a decision. The next time Daniela mentioned a late-night meeting, he wouldn't let it pass. He would stay home, silently, and observe for himself what was happening. The path to the truth had begun, and Ethan knew there would be no turning back. The silence in the house grew thicker, as if every family member sensed that something dark was brewing beneath the surface. Ethan was determined to uncover the truth, but he still didn't know exactly what he should be looking for. He knew Daniela wasn't telling him everything, and that Kate was too scared to fully open up. That night, as he watched his daughter sleep from the threshold of her room, he felt a pang of guilt. How had he allowed doubt to settle into his home? Ethan knew he needed answers, but he also understood that Kate was the key to understanding what was truly happening. However, he didn't want to pressure her or frighten her more than she already was. He had to be patient. The next day, Clara noticed the tension etched on Ethan's face when he arrived home earlier than usual. With her sharp intuition, she sensed something significant was going on. After making sure Kate was occupied drawing in her room, Clara approached Ethan in the kitchen. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said quietly, aware that she couldn't let more time pass. Ethan nodded, feeling grateful to have her as an ally. Clara was the only person who was consistently there for Kate and truly understood what was happening. "I've noticed that Kate is becoming more anxious when Daniela is around," Clara confessed. "And today she told me something that worries me." Ethan felt his stomach churn at those words. What did she say? Clara looked at him seriously, choosing her words carefully. She told me that Daniela makes her promise not to tell you certain things. She says Daniela talks on the phone with someone in secret and always tells her to go to her room while she does. The girl is scared, Ethan. Those words hit him like a slap. Kate's fear was no longer a mere childish intuition. There was something real and tangible in Daniela's behavior that forced him to act. That night, after saying goodbye to Clara, Ethan went to his daughter's room, determined to talk to her. He could no longer ignore what Kate was trying to tell him. He found the little girl sitting on her bed, hugging her stuffed animal. She seemed smaller than she was, fragile, and her sad gaze broke his heart. He sat next to her and enveloped her in a protective hug. Sophie, I want you to tell me something. Why are you afraid of Daniela? He asked gently, stroking her hair. Kate remained silent for a few seconds, as if she were weighing whether she could trust him. Finally, she whispered quietly, She tells me that if I tell you things, you're going to get sad and leave like Mom. Ethan felt the air escape from his chest. His daughter's fear was not only about Daniela, but also about the possibility of losing her father. That emotional manipulation was more cruel than he could have ever imagined. I will never leave, Sophie, he assured her, holding her tightly against his chest. I'm here to stay. Kate sobbed, relieved, and snuggled closer to him. In that moment, Ethan knew he had made a mistake by blindly trusting Daniela. Something very dark was happening, and he had to uncover it before it caused any more harm. After leaving Kate asleep, Ethan locked himself in his study. He felt a mix of anger, guilt, and fear that prevented him from thinking clearly. His daughter's words kept echoing in his mind. You'll get sad, and you'll leave. Daniela was playing with the deepest fears of the little girl, and that was something he couldn't allow. That same night, he made a decision. The next time Daniela had one of her late-night meetings, he would stay home and find out what was going on. He could no longer afford doubts or excuses. He needed evidence. The next morning, Daniela acted as if everything were normal, smiling and preparing breakfast as usual. But Ethan now viewed every gesture with new eyes. He knew that behind that friendly facade lay something more, and he wouldn't be fooled so easily again. I have a meeting tonight, Daniela announced during breakfast. It will be a bit late, so don't wait up for me. Ethan nodded calmly, though inside he felt the tension building in his body. This was the perfect opportunity to execute his plan. Don't worry, he replied, not taking his eyes off his coffee cup. This time, I won't be going anywhere, he thought. As the day went on, Ethan mentally prepared for what was to come. He knew that what he was about to do could change everything, but there was no turning back now. The pieces began to fit together in his mind, and though he still didn't know exactly what he would find, he was sure it wouldn't be good. The time for suspicion was over. Now was the moment to act and uncover the truth. That night would mark the beginning of the end. Night fell over the house, and everything seemed calm. Daniela was ready for her supposed meeting, and Ethan watched her as she got ready in front of the bathroom mirror, carefully choosing her clothes. He couldn't help but notice how different she looked. She wore a fitted skirt and a casual blouse that didn't match the type of professional attire one would expect for a late-night meeting. Are you sure you don't want me to wait up for you? Ethan asked, pretending to be indifferent. Daniela shot him a quick smile. No, you'd better rest. I don't want you to be tired tomorrow because of me. Ethan nodded, hiding the discomfort boiling in his chest. This time, you won't catch me by surprise, he thought to himself. Daniela left the house shortly after, leaving him in an unsettling silence. Ethan waited in the study until he was sure Daniela had truly left. The lights of her car disappeared into the distance, and the house was left in shadows. He moved carefully through the hallways, turning off the lights to avoid raising suspicion if Daniela returned unexpectedly. The silence in the house was deafening. Kate was already asleep in her room, unaware of what her father was preparing to uncover that night. With his heart pounding, he decided to hide in Kate's bedroom closet. From there, he would have a direct view of the hallway and could observe what happened in the house without being discovered. He felt strange doing this, but he knew it was necessary. He couldn't afford to keep ignoring the signs he had overlooked for so long. A couple of hours passed as Ethan remained motionless, feeling time drag slowly. Just when he began to think he might have made a mistake, he heard the faint sound of the front door opening cautiously. Daniela had returned. But she wasn't alone. The muffled laughter of a man accompanied her. Ethan held his breath, feeling his heart pound against his chest. Through the crack in the closet, he saw Daniela enter the hallway with Roberto, a man he had met at one of the social gatherings she had taken him to. The man was younger and had a relaxed demeanor, completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Daniela and Roberto walked toward the living room, laughing softly as if they had no cares in the world. Ethan watched them from a distance, paralyzed by a mix of disbelief and rage. The scene he was witnessing was far worse than he had imagined. It not only confirmed his wife's infidelity, but also revealed her complete lack of respect for him and for their daughter. From his hiding spot, Ethan listened to the conversation that followed. Daniela and Roberto spoke in low voices, but loud enough for him to catch every word. "What are you going to do about him?" Roberto asked indifferently, referring to Ethan. Daniela let out a light laugh. "He doesn't know yet, but he'll find out soon enough. I'm tired of pretending. I just need him to hold on a little longer until we have everything sorted out." Daniela's nonchalant tone left him frozen. What exactly was she planning? Every word he heard made the sense of betrayal grow within him. "And the girl?" Roberto asked coldly. Daniela sighed, as if it were an insignificant detail. "That girl is a problem, but when he leaves, I'll find a way to handle her." Ethan felt his blood run cold upon hearing those words. Not only was she betraying him, but she also planned to get rid of Kate in some way. Rage and fear mixed within him, making it hard to restrain himself from bursting out of the closet and confronting them right then and there. Ethan knew he couldn't rush into this. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. If he confronted Daniela and Roberto right now, he might ruin his chance to protect Kate once and for all. He needed stronger evidence and a clear plan to act without putting his daughter at risk. From his hiding place, he watched them exchange glances and laughter, completely unaware of the suffering they were causing. Every passing second was agony, but Ethan knew he had to endure. If he wanted to win this battle, he needed to play smart. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Roberto said goodbye to Daniela with a quick kiss and left the house. Daniela, carefree, climbed the stairs to the bedroom, unaware that Ethan had seen it all. Ethan waited a few more minutes, ensuring everything was quiet before emerging from the closet. His legs trembled as he walked toward the study, where he sat in the darkness, trying to process what he had just discovered. Daniela hadn't just been unfaithful. She was willing to manipulate his daughter for her own ends. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. Pain and rage consumed him, but he knew he had to remain calm. He couldn't afford to lose control, not now that the truth had come to light. The confrontation would have to wait. As the house remained silent, Ethan made an irrevocable decision. He would contact his lawyer and Josh to plan the next steps. Daniela couldn't stay another day in Kate's life, and he would fight with everything he had to protect his daughter. The next day, Ethan passed through a haze of dark thoughts, struggling to maintain his composure while Daniela's betrayal burned in his mind like an open wound. What he had witnessed the night before left no room for doubt. Daniela hadn't just cheated on him. She was conspiring against him, and worse yet, intended to manipulate Kate to separate her from his side. Despite the fury and anguish consuming him, Ethan knew he had to act intelligently. An impulsive confrontation could worsen the situation, and his priority was to protect Kate. That very morning, he met with Josh to share everything he had uncovered. At the bar where they always met, Ethan recounted to his friend, in a low and tense voice, everything he had seen and heard. Josh looked at him with a furrowed brow, his concern evident. "You can't confront Daniela without solid evidence," Josh said seriously. "If she realizes you know the truth, she could react unpredictably. You need to cover your bases." Ethan nodded, aware that his friend was right. He needed to gather clear evidence of Daniela's infidelity and her intention to manipulate the situation to her advantage. With Josh's help, he contacted a private investigator to follow Daniela's movements. It was crucial to discover who Roberto was and to gather enough evidence for a potential divorce proceeding. Additionally, he needed to ensure that Daniela wouldn't be able to claim custody of Kate. In the following days, Ethan acted with cold precision, maintaining the appearance of normalcy at home while Daniela continued her double life without suspicion. On the surface, he seemed like a devoted husband, but in reality, he was gathering information and waiting for the right moment to act. The private investigator quickly sent him photos of Daniela and Roberto together in various locations, confirming that their relationship was more than a mere fling. In the messages Daniela exchanged with Roberto, there were also hints of her intention to pressure Ethan for assets and control the situation with Kate. Everything fit together in a sinister way. Each new piece of evidence was another blow to Ethan, but it also gave him the strength he needed to continue with his plan. He couldn't afford to break down. Everything he was doing was for Kate's well-being. Meanwhile, Clara continued to take care of Kate and became the girl's greatest emotional support. Ethan noticed how Kate gradually began to open up, trusting him and Clara more. The little girl still feared Daniela, but at least she no longer felt alone. One quiet afternoon, while playing in the garden, Kate asked Ethan a question that deeply moved him. "Are we going to be okay, Dad? You're not going to leave, right?" Ethan hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Yes, Sophie. Everything is going to be okay, I promise." That moment reinforced his determination. He had to get Daniela out of their lives as soon as possible. He couldn't allow the woman who had betrayed his trust to remain near his daughter. One night, Ethan sat alone in the study, reviewing the evidence he had gathered. The photos, the messages, the records of the late-night calls. Each piece of evidence confirmed what his heart already knew. But seeing it all laid out in front of him hit him with devastating force. He had wagered his future, and that of his daughter, on a lie. The most painful part wasn't the infidelity itself, but the way Daniela had toyed with Kate's feelings, manipulating a vulnerable child, taking advantage of her fears to get what she wanted, was something Ethan could never forgive. As he looked at the photos once again, he felt rage and sadness mixing within him. It was hard to accept that the woman he had chosen to rebuild his life with had turned out to be so petty and manipulative. Ethan knew the time to confront Daniela was drawing near. Before acting, he made sure to have the necessary legal support. With his lawyer's help, he prepared the documentation to initiate the divorce process and claim full custody of Kate. He not only wanted to rid himself of Daniela, but also to ensure she couldn't use their daughter as a tool to gain legal advantages. Josh stood by him at every step of the process, offering his unconditional support. "When this is over, you'll be free," Josh told him one day, giving him a pat on the shoulder. Ethan nodded, but he knew that freedom would come at a high price. With all the evidence in hand and the documentation ready, Ethan knew the confrontation was inevitable. There was no room left for doubt or fear. It was time to act and protect what mattered most: Kate. However, he also understood that the confrontation wouldn't be easy. Daniela wasn't the type to give in without a fight, and she would likely try to manipulate him until the last moment. But this time, Ethan was prepared. He knew he would have to be strong for himself and for his daughter. That night, as he watched Kate sleep peacefully, Ethan felt a momentary peace, knowing he was doing the right thing. Tomorrow would be the day everything would change. Daniela would have no idea what was coming. The night brought clarity to Ethan's mind. After weeks of uncertainty, he finally had a clear path forward, to rid himself of Daniela once and for all and protect Kate from any harm the woman could cause. The moment of confrontation was close, but he knew he had to act with precision. He couldn't afford mistakes. Daniela was cunning, and any hesitation could jeopardize his plan. Ethan spent the morning reviewing the evidence gathered by the private investigator once again. Every message, every photo, every recorded conversation was a dagger, confirming Daniela's betrayal and her manipulative intentions. But to ensure success in the divorce, he also needed to prove that he was the best person to care for Kate. The priority was to prevent Daniela from claiming joint custody. That same day, Ethan met with Josh at the firm. His friend had been a pillar of support throughout this process and now accompanied him in the most important decisions. They sat in a small meeting room surrounded by legal documents. "First, make sure you have the petition ready and the notification prepared," Josh said, pointing to the papers on the table. "And you'll need a good lawyer specializing in divorces." "I've already spoken to him," Ethan replied, nodding seriously. "He wants to ensure that the evidence is irrefutable. We need to show that Daniela is unfit for custody of Kate." Josh looked at him with concern. "You know she's going to fight, right? She's not going to give up easily." "I know," Ethan said, looking at the documents, "but I'm not going to let her win." By the end of the meeting, he felt more prepared. With every legal decision he made, he regained a bit more control over his life. He knew this battle wouldn't be easy, but with Josh by his side, he was ready to face it. At home, Clara also became an indispensable ally. As the tension increased between Ethan and Daniela, Clara ensured that Kate didn't feel the weight of the situation. They spent afternoons at the park, drew together, and gradually the little girl began to smile again. Clara's presence was a balm that relieved the anguish of both Ethan and Kate, and with each passing day, Ethan realized how much he trusted her. Ethan knew that custody of Kate was the most delicate battleground. He couldn't prevent Daniela from claiming visitation rights, but he was determined to obtain primary custody. He needed to demonstrate that Daniela was not a positive influence on the little girl, and that her irresponsible and manipulative behavior endangered Kate's emotional well-being. "The key is for you to remain calm throughout the process," his lawyer explained over the phone. "You can't give her any excuse to make you look bad. If she tries to provoke you, don't react. All that matters is Kate." Ethan listened attentively, feeling the determination strengthening within him. This battle was for his daughter, and there was no room for error. Everything had to be perfectly calculated. In the days leading up to the confrontation, Daniela began to notice a change in Ethan's attitude. He no longer tried to engage her or asked her about her late-night outings. He maintained a facade of cold cordiality, as if nothing she did could affect him anymore. Daniela watched him with suspicion. She knew something was happening, but she couldn't pinpoint what it was. "Are you okay?" she asked one night while they were having dinner together. "Perfectly," Ethan replied, with a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. Daniela frowned, clearly uncomfortable with his distant demeanor. She felt her control slipping away, but she had no way of knowing how prepared Ethan was for the next step. The night before the confrontation, Ethan sat on the living room sofa, looking around the house in silence. Every corner of the home reminded him of the happy moments he had tried to build with Daniela, which now felt like a lie. But he also knew this was the end of that chapter. He was ready to close that door and start anew, for Kate's sake. As Kate slept peacefully in her room, Ethan mentally reviewed the plan once more. The divorce would be painful and complicated, but he was prepared for anything. He had learned to be strong for his daughter, and nothing and no one would stop him from protecting her. With everything ready, Ethan knew the confrontation was inevitable. Daniela had no idea what was about to happen, but he no longer felt fear. Every step he had taken had brought him closer to this moment, and now all that was left was to execute the plan. It was the end of the farce and the beginning of a new life. As he turned off the lights and went up the stairs to his room, Ethan allowed himself a moment of calm. He knew the coming days would be difficult, but he also knew he was doing the right thing. For the first time in a long time, he felt he could breathe. He had regained control of his life, and soon he and Kate would be free to start anew. The day of the confrontation arrived, and Ethan was ready. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, aligning allies, and controlling his emotions so as not to let the rage consume him. His priority was Kate, and he knew that any mistake could jeopardize his plan to protect her. Today would be the day everything would break apart, and Ethan was willing to face the consequences. Daniela woke up unaware of what was about to happen. As always, she went down the stairs with her carefree demeanor, making herself coffee and acting as if the harmony in the house were genuine. Ethan watched her in silence from across the table, knowing this was the last time he would see her pretend. "Is something wrong?" Daniela asked, noticing his intense gaze. "Yes," Ethan replied firmly. "We need to talk." Daniela set her cup down on the table, and her expression changed immediately. There was something in Ethan's voice that she didn't like. She crossed her arms, as if trying to shield herself from what was about to come. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, attempting to sound casual, but there was a slight unease in her tone. Ethan pulled out a thick envelope containing all the evidence he had gathered, photos, messages, and call logs that proved not only her infidelity with Roberto, but also the intentions she had concealed. He placed it on the table with a slow, deliberate movement. "About this," he said without raising his voice. His calmness was more dangerous than any shout. Daniela opened the envelope with trembling hands. As she reviewed the contents, her expression shifted from confusion to fury. She knew she had been discovered and that she had no way to deny the truth. "Are you spying on me?" she spat, raising her voice. "No, I'm protecting my daughter." Daniela tried to meet his gaze defiantly, but Ethan was no longer the vulnerable man she had manipulated for months. This time, he was in control. "What do you hope to achieve with this?" Daniela asked, crossing her arms. "I want you to leave," Ethan responded bluntly. "I'm going to file for divorce, and I've submitted a request for sole custody of Kate." Daniela let out a bitter laugh. "Do you really think you can keep everything? You don't have enough evidence to keep me away from Kate." Ethan held her gaze without blinking. "I won't stop you from seeing her, but Kate will not live under your care again." Daniela tried to argue, but every word she spoke revealed more of her true nature. She justified herself by saying she sought affection outside the marriage because Ethan was too busy with work and didn't make her feel loved. She attempted to place the blame on him, manipulating the situation as she always had. "I felt so alone, Ethan. Is it really that hard to understand?" she said with a nearly tearful voice. "That's no excuse," he replied coldly. "You had no right to play with Kate's feelings." Daniela pressed her lips together, unable to find a response. She knew she had lost. During their conversation, Clara had kept Kate occupied in the garden, but the girl, curious about the tension in the air, entered the house at the most critical moment. Upon seeing her parents facing off, Kate ran to Ethan and hugged him tightly. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked with a trembling voice. Ethan enveloped her in his arms and whispered, "Everything is going to be okay, Sophie. We're safe." Daniela's gaze darkened, knowing her time in that house was over. No matter how hard she tried to justify herself, her betrayal was unforgivable. After a few tense moments, Daniela realized she had no more options. The evidence was clear, and any attempt to stay would only complicate her legal situation. Without saying another word, she went upstairs to gather her things. The house, which she had once tried to make her home, no longer belonged to her. Ethan remained silent, holding Kate as he listened to Daniela's footsteps above. He didn't feel relief yet, only a deep sadness for everything he had lost. But he also knew the worst was over, and now he had a chance to start anew with his daughter. Daniela came down with a small suitcase in hand and looked at him one last time. "This isn't over, Ethan," she warned, a bitter smile on her face. "Yes, it is," he replied calmly, "and you won't manipulate us again." Daniela left without looking back, and the door closed with a sharp click, marking the end of a chapter filled with deceit and pain. That same afternoon, Ethan and his lawyer filed for divorce. The strong evidence ensured that Daniela would have no solid arguments to claim custody of Kate. Still, Ethan knew the legal battle was just beginning. Daniela would try to fight for her share of the assets, but he was ready to fight with everything necessary to protect his daughter. Kate, although still confused by the changes, began to show signs of relief. With Clara by her side, the little girl was starting to become the joyful child she had been before Daniela entered their lives. That night, for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt peace. The road ahead would still be challenging, but he had taken the first step toward a clearer and safer future. Kate was safe, and he was determined to rebuild his life away from lies and manipulation. As he turned off the lights in the house, he paused at the threshold of Kate's room and watched her sleep peacefully. That sight gave him the strength he needed. He had won the first battle, and although the war wasn't over, he felt better prepared for whatever came next. With Daniela out of the house, Ethan prepared to close that dark chapter for good and rebuild his life with Kate. However, the legal battle for custody and assets was still ongoing. Ethan would have to remain steadfast until the end to ensure his daughter's well-being and guarantee that they would never be vulnerable again. The first dawn without Daniela in the house brought with it a different silence, one that didn't weigh heavy. Ethan woke up with a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. He knew there was still a long road ahead, especially with the divorce process and the custody battle for Kate. But he had taken the first step toward a safer future for both of them. Daniela was gone, and with her, the constant threat that had loomed over their lives. The days following Daniela's departure were calm, but challenging. Ethan focused his energy on rebuilding his relationship with Kate, who was gradually beginning to shed the fear she had felt for months. The little girl started playing, laughing, and showing herself to be the cheerful child she used to be. They spent afternoons drawing together, reading stories before bed, and exploring new games in the nearby park. Ethan felt grateful to have Clara, who continued to care for Kate and provide her with a safe space to express herself. Clara had become an essential figure in their lives, helping Kate process the emotional change she was experiencing. The little girl still had tough questions, but Ethan always found a way to respond with honesty and love. "Is Daniela going to come back?" Kate asked one night. "No, sweetheart. She's not coming back," Ethan replied, stroking her hair. "Now it's just you and me, and everything is going to be okay." Meanwhile, the divorce process was progressing. As he had anticipated, Daniela didn't give up easily and demanded a significant share of the assets and visitation rights with Kate. However, the evidence Ethan had gathered was compelling, and his lawyer was able to demonstrate that Daniela was not a suitable influence for the girl. The recorded conversations, the messages, and the testimonies from Clara and Josh tipped the scales in Ethan's favor. After several weeks of tense negotiations, the court granted him full custody of Kate, allowing Daniela limited supervised visits. The relief was immense. Ethan knew that there would still be challenges to face, but having custody of his daughter meant they had won the most important battle. With Daniela out of their lives, Ethan began to notice how much he appreciated Clara's presence. She had not only been an ally during the toughest times, but also a close friend he could fully trust. They spent more and more time together, caring for Kate and sharing simple yet meaningful moments. Although a part of him felt that something more than friendship could develop between them, Ethan decided not to rush into anything. He wanted to take things slow, ensuring that his priority would always be Kate's well-being. Moreover, Clara shared that same vision. True love should be built with patience and honesty. The house, once a place of tension and lies, began to fill with light and joy again. Ethan decided to change some furniture and redecorate with Kate, letting her choose the colors for her room. It was a symbolic way to erase the past and build something new. Kate chose a soft blue for the walls, and together they hung drawings and photos reflecting the happy moments they were now creating. "This is our home, Sophie," Ethan told her as they hung a picture together. "Here we will always be safe." Although the emotional scars didn't disappear immediately, Ethan and Kate found ways to move forward. Each day was an opportunity to rebuild their relationship and create new memories. Ethan knew that the path hadn't been easy, but he also understood that life had given them a second chance. He had learned to value what truly mattered: his relationship with his daughter, self-trust, and the power to rebuild from the ruins. He would never again allow someone to manipulate their lives. Now, they controlled their future. On a sunny afternoon, while walking in the park, Kate ran towards Ethan with a wide smile on her face, arms outstretched. It was a small gesture, but for Ethan, it meant everything. Every smile from his daughter was a sign that they were on the right path. "Can we get ice cream, Dad?" Kate asked excitedly. Ethan laughed, feeling how the weight of the past was finally fading away. "Of course, Sophie. Let's go for ice cream." That day, as they shared laughter and ice cream, Ethan felt a certainty in his heart. It had all been worth it. They had weathered the storm, and although the road hadn't been easy, they were now free to start anew. With Daniela out of their lives and Kate safe by his side, Ethan looked to the future with optimism. He had won the battle for his daughter, but he had also gained something more: the certainty that he would always be able to overcome any obstacle for the love of Kate. The house, his relationship with Clara, and Kate's laughter were proof that they had found their own happy ending. And although life would never stop presenting challenges, they now knew that together they could face anything. That night, as Kate slept soundly, Ethan lingered for a moment in the doorway of her room, watching his daughter with a peaceful smile. They had made it this far, and the future was theirs to build. As he turned off the light, he knew they had finally found the peace they had long sought. True love is not measured by the words spoken, but by the actions that show care and respect. Sometimes, letting go of those who hurt us is the greatest act of love we can perform, especially for those who need us most. Ethan and Kate's story reminds us that strength does not lie in enduring the unsustainable, but in having the courage to protect what we love most. Facing the truth, no matter how difficult, is the first step to finding peace and building a brighter future. Thank you for joining us until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave us a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Leave us your opinion in the comments. We'd love to know what you think. See you in the next story.